Bluegrass Jam Along is proud to be sponsored by Collins Guitars and Mandolins, each and every one built from the sound up in Austin, Texas. This episode is also brought to you by Peghead Nation, the home of roots music instruction. If you want to improve your playing, join me and thousands of other pickers getting better every day at pegheadnation.com. Hi, this is Matt, and you're listening to Bluegrass Jam Along, the podcast for anyone and everyone who loves bluegrass. Hey everybody, I have a quick episode for you today because today is June the 8th, which is Tony Rice's birthday. I put out some episodes last year to celebrate the 40th anniversary of Church Street Blues, and I spoke to loads of guests, including the person you're going to hear from today, and that ended up being over 5 hours of stuff. So I thought, to celebrate Tony's birthday today, I'd re-release this chat with Alison Krauss, because it was kind of buried in 5 hours of stuff, and I don't think everybody heard it. I think some people were put off by the length of it. And it's just a chance to put it out again and celebrate some of the wonderful memories Alison had of Tony. It was an extraordinary chat. I really enjoyed talking to her. And obviously so much love and warmth and respect for Tony and his music. And it came across in the conversation. So just to celebrate Tony Rice's birthday, here is Alison Krauss remembering Tony Rice.
When I would listen to Tony's records, you have an idea of who you think that person is, and the character that comes to your mind. I was, 12, 13 when I first was hearing his music for the first time. And I grew up with playing with two very good songwriters that were in the same band, John Pennell and Nelson Mandrell. And so in that process of, being around when they were agonizing, not Nelson as much, but John very much agonizing over his, word choices. And when I mean agonizing, I mean the deliberateness of it and the passion in having something be said so distinctively and so agonizing maybe is a good word for it, but not in the negative sense, but in a perfectionist sense, or someone striving for something excellent. He and I would drive around and listen to Tony's records, and when someone chooses a song, just like Tony was so connected to Gordon Lightfoot, that personality that those songs had with him, then, it produced a character you think you know. And I think there's such a romantic part of your whole presentation that comes from what words you choose to say that come out of your mouth, when you're singing, that it's lyrically, it's so important. Even a lot of people don't even listen to lyrics, but I think it can't help but get in there. So, and I'm not a songwriter. I may do a little bit of editing or make some suggestions on a title or a subject, to people that I've worked with a long time. But I'm fascinated by that gift. I've always been. I think it's as powerful as any gift on earth, really, that ability to put poetry and melody together that change somebody's whole state of mind after it's turned off. So I think Tony, for me, and so many thousands of people, that character that we saw him as being so heroic and romantic at the same time, there's just no match for it. And then to combine it with how he presented himself, there's just nothing like it to me. Nothing, no, and how he sequenced his songs, and it's funny because you think what somebody's doing and in the intent that they have behind it. I didn't get to talk too much to him about all of that through the years, you don't sit down and go, what was your intent? You don't get a chance to do that. And I think his stuff was probably much more off the cuff than I realized. But it is sure, I don't even like to get the records out too many times later in life because I don't want to lose the feeling they gave me. When you hear something again, I have to choose carefully so I don't mix my feelings up with now. I want to have those old feelings connected to those records, if that makes sense. I want it to take me back, so I save it.
It's interesting, isn't it?
If that makes any sense.
No, totally. I think when you hear a record can have a massive, really profound effect on how that record affects you, the time of your life and what your circumstances are, and particularly with lyrics. You say a lot of people don't listen to lyrics, but if you do, the lyrical content of a song could hit you like a truck on a particular day when you feel a certain way, and maybe 5 years before you wouldn't have felt that way about it.
And, even though you may not necessarily be listening to what the lyrics are, it doesn't make it any less true. It's still true whether or not someone's paying attention or could recite it back.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the interesting things about Church Street Blues, because it does have some fiddle tunes on it, but it is very much a selection of singer-songwriter kind of material at a time where Tony was sort of largely known as somebody who played in band contexts. And it's that ability to hear Tony just sit there with a guitar that makes Church Street Blues really magical.
Yeah, him being so exposed. Though I heard that record later after I first heard the Bluegrass album band stuff, and that's what my friend John Pennell would play and gave me tapes of. He'd make cassettes of stuff. And Church Street Blues I heard later. So to hear him so exposed and to see those, you've seen, I'm sure, the guitar lesson, I think it was on Homespun.
Yeah.
Where he played tunes like that. And, he was just such a mystery to us. And then to have him so exposed and him become more mysterious is, I think there was as much wondering who he was as there was trying to figure out who he was. You liked, you liked wondering just as much.
Yeah, maybe that's the appeal of that record, is because it is largely just Tony. You get a bit more of a, and because he, obviously I didn't know Tony, but that so many people talk about him as being a little bit elusive and a bit hard to reach. And so with such an exposed record, it makes you really want to lean in and listen to what he's telling you, because you can hear all of it.
Yeah.
And I think there's something, look, that record, the singing is as good as on anything he's done, and you really get to hear that as well.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I love House Carpenter, and I loved Edmund Fitzgerald, and now his singing, you couldn't tell where he was from, and no one sounded like him. I mean, I've heard, Nate Bray from the Bray brothers. He did favor his voice to me. I thought some, but no one could really grasp that, and I guess that's where those songs come in, and it's I don't know if anybody. I've had conversations hours and hours about what we thought Tony was, or how he might have thought about something, and I just recently found him talking at a workshop in 1986. And do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
from the Strawberry Festival.
Yeah. Yes,
that's the most I'd ever heard him. This is just like last week, and I'd never seen this of him talking about music and playing, and I mean, it was fascinating. And I wrote John Pennell, I'm like, you got to watch this thing of him talking, about, unfolding his whole thought process, which I never got to hear too much about it. And it just seems very natural. Then at times he seemed to be more deliberate in what he was talking about. It's hard. I always have imagined what those studio sessions were like, and I really have no idea. And then if I found out, I don't know if I'd want to give up my thoughts what I thought it was like.
It's funny, isn't it? You like you said at the beginning, you sort of build a picture based on all of this, and it obviously is true, because if somebody is an artist and they're communicating themselves to you, like, the picture you have is correct, but it's also from a particular angle that may, and then if you see a different light shone on it from another angle, it's a different thing entirely, and we can get quite protective over our pictures of people whose music we love.
That's right. Whatever my picture is, it may or may not be true, but I sure like it.
Yeah, and it's interesting you saying
really like it.
Yeah, and I think Tony provokes that in people more than most do, and maybe it's partly the elusiveness, but I think there's something about the way he expressed it in everything. So, like, the music was very, very deliberately thought about and detailed and intricate, but so was the fashion and his choice in cars and watches, and, like, it seems like everything that he did, if he decided something was worth doing, it was worth doing.
Yeah, I would think someone that particular isn't only going to be particular in one area. Usually they got all kinds of stuff, that they're pretty specific about. But yeah, I didn't know him. Just he was very. I played with him some in the late '80s, and was around him a bit then. But he was, pretty to himself then as well.
Yeah, and I think that's why people love Church Street Blues, because it's the nearest you can get to feeling like you're sitting in a room with Tony just playing a guitar for you. It still has that. I do listen to it regularly. It's not been in my life for that long, a few years really, and so to sit there and put the headphones on and just get lost in it, like you're sat next to somebody telling you a story, it's a beautiful thing.
Stunning.
And after we had that chat, I just asked Alison, is there anything else you want to share? And often those bits of the conversations were really revealing, and people just sort of added extra memories that maybe hadn't come out as part of the conversation. And there's some lovely stuff came out of Alison's response to this. So here is Alison chatting about spending a bit of time with Tony.
Well, a number of years ago, first in the 80s, I had a permit, and a driver's permit, and I didn't have a driver's license yet. And we had played in Baltimore, but we were all staying in Washington, D.C. And so he's like, Krauss, you drive. I'm like, oh gosh, I got a permit. Yeah. So I drove him back to the hotel where we all were in D.C. And on that way back, he played Benny Goodman, and who's the guitar player? But he played another few bits of music that he loved, and he's like, listen to that, listen to that. And I'm like, more scared of driving. And that was just kind of a, cool experience to get to talk or hear what he liked, in any way about anything. Because I always used to wonder what he listens to when he's, you don't know what someone likes. And then years later, and I think it was 2005, we did a tour with Tony, our band, and we did all his songs, because he had been doing that, having different people come sing the leads on stuff. So he did a tour with Union Station, and we did all that. And Jerry says to me, he goes, there's 2 tickets to the symphony. Go get Tony and take him to the symphony. And I'm like, I don't want to I don't want to do it. He's like, take him to the symphony. And so, and at this point, I can't remember how old I am, late 30s or whatever. And I pull up to the hotel, and he's standing out there. He goes, hey, you remember the last time you drove me? You remember the last time you drove me somewhere? And I'm like, I do. I was hoping you might have forgotten. But we did. We drove to the symphony, and he talked about the guitar and not singing anymore and what that was like. And, just that's probably the only, those 2 times, or the times I had any kind of private conversation where, he shared what he thought about playing and what he felt about what he heard and just about his own things. It was really magical. I'll never forget those bits because it was, a special time, even if it was for one time, maybe a little longer driving the car there, but another 10 minutes to the to the symphony. It was special to hear somebody you admire so much, even to say they like something. And while we were at the Symphony Hall, it was Edgar Meyer and a really beautiful piano player. And there was one moment that they were playing, and I remember it was so stunning, I held my breath. Like it took my breath away. And at the same time, he goes, like this. And I went, oh my gosh, I like something at the same time. Whatever. It's silliness, but real. Was proud of myself for liking something at the same time.
That's lovely.
It was a moment.
It's funny how many people talk, like Chris Eldridge talks about spending time with Tony when he was at college and not really ever picking a guitar up, just talking about things and listening to things, and that being more important than where you put you. So you're talking about him, about Tony sort of talking at the festival in that workshop. And I would rewatch the Homespun videos, and they're great. You can just sit and watch them. You don't need to even pick your guitar up. They're just fascinating documents. But you can sort of see that he sort of struggles sometimes to talk about what he does. And Happy's sort of saying to him, can you play that a bit slower so we can see what you're doing? And he's sort of gone, you can almost see him wanting to say, I don't really know how I do that. I just do. That's how I fix that problem. And it's like, that's in my fingers. I don't know. And it's elusive stuff. And so those moments where you do hear him talk about it and sort of find the words and find a way of, they're really magical.
Yeah, any look into that character is pretty fascinating. Because there's not a very it's not an open door, really, is there?
No, and that makes you want to lean in even more, doesn't it? I think any kind of personality or art that doesn't just run up to you and kind of introduce itself, that makes you lean in and step in and do a bit of work, and they're always a little bit more intriguing.
Yeah, I always found, he's one of those people, and the records, you end up with more questions at the end of it, and you just want to understand more, and you don't get to. And when he passed, there was so much hope for so many people that he might sing and play again on some regular basis, and that was a really hard blow to know that was over. It really was devastating, like that hope was gone.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing with any kind of artist who passes suddenly or before you expect them to. It's just the loss of the art, because most of us don't know the human. Like, I obviously never met Tony Rice and never would have done, but just to know there's no more music coming when the music is so precious.
And no more music coming, but then everybody was just, I felt like always rooting for him to be able to heal his voice, and that someday it was going to come out again.
And one of the beautiful things that did happen after he passed was just the outpouring of celebration of what there was and what we did have and what we did know, and just so much kind of celebration of the music and of Tony, and it was sort of quite overwhelming. And it felt like, as somebody who is outside of that community, and it sort of felt like it included everybody. It's sort of, I don't know how to describe it, but it felt like some doors were just opened and anybody was invited in who wanted to be part of that.
Yeah, and he seemed like in later years became, quite generous with himself and new players, and he did take on a much more enveloping, I guess, is that the right word? Enveloping role, whatever, is that the right, inclusive role with people? It seemed like he seemed to get more outgoing in later years.
Yeah. So it's fascinating. Just the whole. I think that's why doing things like this is so interesting, because everybody has questions. Everybody sort of like I started this process feeling like I was talking to the people who knew the answers, and actually I'm just talking to people who have some other questions
that don't have the answers either.
So everybody's got a question. Everybody's like, feels like they didn't know him as well as they would have liked to, or didn't get to spend as much time with him as they would have liked to. And it's been a joy and an honor to talk to people about him, really.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much.
Bluegrass Jam Along is proud to be sponsored by Collings Guitars and Mandolins, making some of the finest guitars and mandolins in the world since the 1970s. Visit collingsguitars.com and find out why.